Greetings, mathematicians. In this video, we're going to start working with variables in one equation. But first, for our warm-up, we're going to have you start with coming up with different words that represent different operations. So start by pausing the video and brainstorming some different words that you can come up with for each of these symbols. And then come back to the video once you think you have a good list. All right, welcome back. You may have come up with many words, some that may or may not be on this list, but here are just a couple of possibilities for you. So the first sign is the addition sign, and you might have come up with something like add, sum, greater than, increased by. The next one is the subtraction symbol. You may have said subtract, difference of, less than, decreased by. The next one is the multiplication symbol, which more often in algebra is going to be shown by a dot rather than an X, or maybe even just two things written next to each other. So remember, if you see something like XY, that's X and Y being multiplied, or 3X, that's 3 times X. So we're more likely not going to use this X so much in algebra anymore because the X could be confused between multiplication and a variable. But that could be a product, per, sometimes you'll also see of, each, every. Those are some different words you might see that are a hint that you should use multiplication. The next one is your division sign, which is a quotient, split evenly, half, quarter, third. Don't forget that a fraction is another way to write a quotient. So if you see something like x over 4, that's x divided by 4. And your last one is your equal sign. You might say equal. If you see is, this is something. Is means equal. Finding a total is where you'll also see an equal sign. So this is just a couple possibilities. You may have come up with others as well. And here are our essential questions. We're going to be figuring out how do we use properties of equalities and algebraic properties to solve equations, and also how do we relate these to real-world problems. And before we get started, just a couple of definitions. You want to make sure you know the difference between an expression and an equation. So they're pretty similar. An equation is made up of expressions. An expression is just a phrase in algebra that can contain numbers or variables or both, and operations. Remember, operations are addition, subtraction, multiplication, division, square roots, squaring, that sort of thing. And then equations are when you take two expressions and you relate them to each other with an equal sign. So next up, we're going to have a couple of sentences, and we're going to figure out whether these are expressions or equations. And we're going to look for some key words here to help us tell the difference. So first we have the sum of 6 and a number. That is an expression. That would be 6 plus x. Next up we have the product of 12 and a number equals 72. This one is an equation. And the way that we know it is an equation is because it has the word equals in it. So we are to underline the words that make it an equation. And we know that one's an equation because it has equals in it. That's kind of our key word there. All right, moving on here. Next up we have the quotient of 6 and a number is 2. This one is also an equation. And the key word here is the word is. So we got equals is a giveaway, is a giveaway. So whenever you see is, that means equals. Next, how we have 8 added to a number. That one's just an expression. That would be x plus 8. Same set of directions here. Now we have a number less than 24 is 0. This one is an equation. Again, we've got the word is there. So So same as that previous one. The word is your giveaway. And then last up, I'm going to have you pause the video here and come up with 2 examples of your own. Write your own expression, write your own equation. All right, so for those last 2, there are lots of correct answers. The main thing is that for your equation, you want to have something like this is that, or this equals that. And for your expression, you don't want to have the word is or the word equals in it. So you might have a lot of correct options there. All right, and moving on, next we want to practice taking these expressions and equations that are written as words, and we want to turn them into symbols. So for this first one, we've got the quotient. Remember from our warm-up that quotient means division. So the quotient of 7 and a number. The order that you see these things is going to tell you which number is your numerator and which number is your denominator. So the quotient of 7 and a number. Whenever you see a number, that tells you to use a variable. Typically we use x, but technically you can use any letter you would like there. So the quotient of 7 and a number added to 3. So you're going to be adding that to 3. Now for the second one, the quotient of 7 and a number added to 3. That's the same thing we just had. But then what's different is they've now added this part at the end that says is 11. So is 11. Remember, is means equal, so equals 11. All right, so next I'm going to have you pause the video and give these problems a try on your own. So again, they're going to be written in words. You're going to try to write them in symbols. All right, so now that you've had a chance to try these, here are some possible solutions. Now you may have possibly written them slightly different. So for example, in number 4, 2/3, maybe you wrote that as 2 divided by 3. That's another way to write 2/3. Number 5, I kind of wrote that as 2 ways already. You can write that as 1/4 or x divided by 4. So sometimes there's 2 different ways to write the same thing. It can be a little bit various there in terms of how you can write your answer, but those should be equivalent. Before we move on, one comment that I'll make here, kind of a common misconception. Sometimes people see this less than, so 2 less than the product of 2 and a number, and they get confused about when is this less than? When is that subtraction? And when is it this less than symbol? So if it says less than, like this problem, that's how you know it's going to be a subtraction problem. If it says is less than, is a way that you know that this is going to be an operation where you would have a less than symbol in it as well, where you're comparing 2 things. So again, that word is how you know you're going to have an inequality or an equal sign. But since there is no word is here, and it's just a plain old less than, that's how we know it's going to be subtraction instead.